We like to think history is a story of progress. It's not. It's a 5,000-year battle royale where the prize is total domination and the price is, well, everything. Since the dawn of civilization, there has always been one big dog. One empire that looked at the map and decided it wasn't enough. We're going to speedrun the strongest, most brutal empire of every single era, from 3000 BC to right now. We aren't talking about their pottery or their poetry. We're talking about how they conquered, how they killed, and how they kept their boot on the neck of the world. Buckle up. We're starting at ground zero. Before 2300 BC, the world was just a bunch of city-states bickering over water rights. Then came Sargon of Akkad. He didn't just want to be a king, he wanted to be the king of kings. The Parthian Empire was the prototype. Sargon realized something simple. If you have a standing army of professional killers, while everyone else is using farmers with pitchforks, you win. Every time. He united Mesopotamia not with diplomacy, but by tearing down the walls of every city that defied him. He installed the first true military dictatorship. But being the first empire meant dealing with the first empire-sized problems. Constant rebellions and famine. When this thing collapsed around 2154 BC, it was so catastrophic that people blamed the gods. But the blueprint was set. Violence scales. Fast forward to 1550 BC, the Akkadians were gone, and Egypt decided to stop building pyramids and start building a war machine. Welcome to the new kingdom. Forget the peaceful priests you see in movies. Pharaohs like Thutmose III and Ramesses II were warlords. They turned the Nile into an assembly line for gold and grain that funded the most advanced tech of the Bronze Age, the chariot. They bullied the entire Mediterranean. Neighboring kings wrote letters begging the pharaoh for gold because in Egypt, gold is as common as dust. But the new kingdom wasn't just rich, it was arrogant. They etched their victories onto stone walls so massive, we're still reading their propaganda 3,000 years later. They were the first superpower to understand something critical. Controlling the narrative is just as important as controlling the land. If Egypt was the golden superpower, the Neo-Assyrians were the nightmare. Rising around 911 BC, they became the villains of the ancient world. They didn't just conquer you, they wanted to traumatize you. The Assyrians turned warfare into a science, and terror into a state policy. They were the first to fully utilize iron weapons and heavy siege engines. If a city resisted, they didn't just sack it. They flayed the leaders alive and piled the skulls of citizens by the city gates. Why? So the next city would surrender without a fight. And it worked. They built the largest military machine the world had ever seen, on a foundation of pure psychological horror. They were the first empire to realize that fear is cheaper than a garrison. By 550 BC, the world was ready for a different kind of management. Enter the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Founded by Cyrus the Great, this empire was an absolute unit. At its peak, Persia controlled 44% of the world's population. Nearly 1 out of every 2 human beings on Earth answered to the Persian king. They understood something the Assyrians didn't. You can't flay 44% of humanity and expect them to pay taxes. So they tried tolerance. Keep your gods. Keep your customs. Just bow to the King of Kings. They built the Royal Road, A highway system so efficient that messengers could cross the empire in days instead of months. For the first time, an empire felt like a global government instead of just a conquering army. While Persia was flexing in the west, India was being forged in fire. Around 322 BC, the Mauryan Empire rose up. Chandragupta Maurya looked at the fractured kingdoms of India and said, "Mine." He built a centralized state with a spy network that would make modern intelligence agencies jealous. His army was backed by thousands of war elephants. But the real turning point came with his grandson, Ashoka. In the Kalinga War, Ashoka's army slaughtered over 100,000 people. The river reportedly ran red with blood. The devastation was so horrific, it broke him. He pivoted from brutal warlord to pacifist Buddhist almost overnight. One of the only times in history a superpower reached peak violence and then voluntarily chose peace. Move to 206 BC. While Rome was rising in the west, the Han Dynasty was turning China into the world's most efficient machine. The Qin had unified China through extreme brutality, burning books and burying scholars. The Han kept the unity, but refined the system. They managed 60 million people with a bureaucracy so advanced it essentially invented the civil service exam. But don't let the robes fool you. The Han expanded aggressively into Korea, into Vietnam. They crushed the Xiongnu on the steppe. They established the Silk Road, not just for trade, but to project power all the way to Rome. They proved that the pen, or the brush, can be just as deadly as the sword if you have enough paperwork to back it up. From 27 BC to 476 AD, the Roman Empire was the gold standard for might makes right. Rome wasn't just a state, it was a meat grinder. They turned the Mediterranean Sea into a Roman swimming pool. We glorify the aqueducts and the roads, but remember how they were built. By millions of slaves, captured during brutal campaigns of extermination. Ask the Carthaginians how civilized Rome was. Ah, wait, you can't. Rome wiped them off the map. Their genius was assimilation. Fight for Rome, earn citizenship. They turned conquered enemies into the very legions that conquered the next enemy. A Ponzi scheme of violence. 500 years long. While Europe struggled, the Tang dynasty hit its peak. Starting in 618 AD, this was China's golden age. Massive wealth, poetry, global cities, but also one of the darkest chapters in history. The An Lushan Rebellion in the mid-8th century wasn't just a civil war, it was an apocalypse. Census records suggest tens of millions vanished from the tax rolls. Proportionally, one of the deadliest events in human history. The Tang proved the bigger the empire, the harder the fall. Jump to 1206. Genghis Khan united the tribes. What followed was a force of nature. The largest contiguous land empire in history. 24 million square kilometers. They didn't just defeat armies. They deleted civilizations. The Khwarezmian Empire? Gone. The Kievan Rus? Crushed. Baghdad? Burned. Its great library thrown into the river until the water ran black with ink. They killed an estimated 40 million people. So many that forests regrew over farmland. Carbon levels dropped. The planet cooled. An empire so violent, it accidentally altered the climate. By 1300, gunpowder changed everything. The Ottoman Empire picked it up and held on to it for 6 centuries. They conquered Constantinople. They ruled across 3 continents, but their darkest innovation wasn't a cannon, it was the devshirme, the blood tax. Christian boys taken from their families, converted, trained, turned into elite soldiers, the janissaries. The Sultan's most loyal troops were the stolen children of his own subjects. Psychological dominance on another level. In the 18th and 19th centuries, an island the size of Michigan decided it owned the world. The British Empire. At its peak in 1920, it controlled 25% of Earth's land and ruled 412 million people. But it wasn't just flags and maps. It was industrialized conquest. From the Opium Wars to famines in India, the world became a supply chain. They didn't need public terror displays. They used bureaucracy, economic strangulation, cleaner on paper, just as deadly in practice. Post-1945, the United States of America. Different strategy. It doesn't usually conquer land. It conquers systems. The world's reserve currency. A military budget bigger than the next 10 combined. Cultural dominance that puts Hollywood in every living room. This is the empire of influence, the most powerful entity to ever exist. But history teaches one rule. Being on top means you have the furthest to fall. From Sargon's bronze swords to nuclear stockpiles, the tools change. The story doesn't. Empires are built on the idea that order is worth the price of freedom, and usually the price of blood. History isn't over. The map is always being redrawn.